Dr. Casey McPherson. So a little bit about me before we get started on today's topic. I am a postdoc at UAB, and what a postdoc is the equivalent to what medical students do for when they graduate medical school and they go do their residency program. That's what a postdoc is for PhD doctoral graduates who graduate with their PhD. I got my PhD in medical pharmacology in Jackson, Mississippi. And then I came here to do my postdoc, and I've been at UAB for a couple of years. And right now, I am actually a data scientist where I'm trying to figure out different ways to already approved drugs that are on the market to combat several different types of kidney disease. So we're using a lot of what we call omics. That means genomics, proteomics. That is basically just the measure of variation or changes in gene expression or protein expression. So that is a little about me. And today we're going to be talking about, let's see, there it is. I'll go ahead and share my slides. All right, so today we're going to have like a research writing workshop. I was told just now that y'all are kind of trying to put a research magazine together, and so we're basically going to just like walk through, well, what is the process of writing anything that's research related. Okay, so today's agenda, we're going to talk about the types of research writing that there is, just a big broad one. Then we're going to talk about the process. Then we're going to break down that process and talk about how-tos on each step, like how to do things. And lastly, we're going to end with author responsibilities. And I please invite anyone to interrupt me, ask questions, chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay, so what research paper? It is basically a final product from the process that involves research, critical thinking, source evaluation, organization, and composition. A few other things is the thing that I like to highlight is the verbs. So like you have to investigate, you have to evaluate, you explore, you interpret. The purpose of a research paper is to further the field in which it is written, provide the author an opportunity to increase his or her knowledge in that field. The overarching goal of a research paper is not to inform the reader what others have to say about the topic of your choice, but to draw on what others have said about that topic and engage the sources in order to offer a unique perspective on the issue at hand. So what are the types of research writing? I broke it down to what we in the science world, like basically two real big umbrellas for papers. And one of them is research papers. And what I call that is your science article. It's your science, it's your work. So it is your own research work that you're trying to share with other scientists as well as the general public. And the purpose is to evolve and forward the field. It gives new information. So not only are you interpreting the information and giving a new interpretation, you're also giving new facts, new that were previous you now know from experiments. And then the goal is to convince the audience the research is important and get it in a valid way and it's relevant. Since it is about your own work, it is very specific. It is original work. When you contrast that to a review paper, which is probably something y'all may be doing most of for like a magazine article, the purpose is just to review already published literature from other people or even yourself and put it into some new perspective. It can serve as a way to just give a list of bibliographies, and it offers critical evaluation of the published literature and important conclusions based on that literature. And so the subject is fairly generalized, and is now technically not necessarily original work, even though your interpretation of it may be original. And so with those two things in mind, a research paper is organized with three main parts: an introduction, materials, methods, results, and discussion. So like your scientific method, the story of that. Whereas a review paper, basically you definitely usually don't have any results sections. You mostly just have a really well-developed intro and a well-developed discussion. I marked out methods, and I probably should have put a question mark beside it. Most of the time, you're not going to have methods for a review paper. However, the times that you do, you would, for the times that you would have how did you find all of your sources? Like, did you have criteria that that are specified that you just have to stay in this box? You can describe that in a short method section. All right. And so now we're going to go through the process. Okay, there's basically four main steps of the writing process. It's prep, drafting, doing your reps, side. Prepping, I'm going to go ahead and be straightforward, honest, and transparent with y'all. First of all, the writing process is a challenge, even if you're experienced at it. So do not feel overwhelmed, and don't feel bad for feeling overwhelmed. It is okay. I still get overwhelmed, and I've been doing this for over a decade. Your prep is probably going to be the most time-consuming part. That's where you're gathering all of your materials. Drafting is probably the hardest step for most because writer's block can happen even before you start to write. You just have such anxiety that you can't even start writing, and we're going to talk about ways to get around that. Reps, that's revising, editing, and proofing. And usually this doesn't take a long time, and it's usually not very hard, but it's extremely important for the comprehension. If people cannot read and follow the flow of your information, then it kind of defeats the purpose of writing. And then citing, of course, I'm sure y'all know about plagiarism and whatnot. We don't want to do that. That is bad. But citing, especially if you think about the context of our social dynamics right now with all this misinformation, citing is core of the connection to you and the audience. Without it, you have no foundation. You have broken the trust between you and the audience. And so it's imperative that you cite your sources. So now we're going to talk about the first step, which is how do we prep? And that involves understanding your assignment, analyzing your audience, developing your topic, getting an outline, and getting that information. Okay, understanding the writing assignment. It can basically be broken down into 5 brief steps where you get a full assessment, you mark important detail, you have some form of to-do list where you write them out, where you highlight it, you forecast, and you prioritize. And so when I mean about a brief but full assessment, that typically just means you actively skim through sometimes like it might be a homework assignment, you take notes of the heading and organization, and the best way to emphasize the important information. I know for me, usually especially when applying for grants, when I'm submitting a paper to a journal, I go to the source where I'm going to submit, and I download their sessions, their rules, and I will physically go and do the next step of highlight everything that's important. Like, is there a word limit? Is there a citation limit? Is there a page limit? Is there a figure limit? Are there deadlines? What's their process? Are there anything in there they require that typically isn't like a generally known requirement? You should definitely always have a to-do list, and this is where you list out all of your action items from that you've gathered from the important details that you've highlighted. After you do that, you forecast. And what I mean by that is you determine how long each of those to-do items are going to take you. And you should know about how long it'll take you to choose a topic. You know, okay, I'm going to spend day one just looking and just brainstorming about topics. And then day two, I'm going to just find all my resources. Day three, I'm going to read through those resources. And or you can take 2 days or half a day, whatever, but you need to go ahead and basically make yourself a timeline and stick to that timeline the best that you can. And always prioritize your to-do list. There are certain things that may be time sensitive, for instance, deadlines. I say this as common sense driven. And also rubric driven. So common sense meaning going back to your important details. Obviously, if there's a deadline to maybe write a letter of intent that you're going to publish something in the next few months, go ahead and probably do that first before looking for resources. Rubric driven for homework assignments and even for some journals and some other articles or other forms of writing, they will actually have like their own rubric. And so usually the rubrics will help you determine which should be high priority or low priority. So after you understand your assignment or like your purpose of your writing, you need to analyze your audience. But knowing your audience helps focus on a topic, find a start point, and will determine the overall writing style that you choose to use. You need to approach the audience analysis of a research paper the same way a speaker would preparing for an oral presentation. Now, what I mean by that is basically addressing the audience with a certain types of questions. Like, who is your general audience? Is it your classmate? Is it the entire school? Just your department? Is it your whole field of research? So when you submit to scientific journals, like, who are you writing for? Do you think your audience is interested in the topic, and why or why not? Why should they be if they're not already? What about the topic is the audience already interested in? And how can you pique the general interest in the audience for this topic? And you also need to think about the context and how it will affect the audience perception of the topic. How will the audience use this information? Is this just like a fun, just so you know kind of thing? Or is it to inform them or update them on ethics or update them on a medical finding? What does your audience know and doesn't know about this topic? What do they need to know? What part will they agree with? And how will you broaden or deepen their knowledge with the parts that they already agree with? And what parts will they not agree with? And how will you address these? All right, so for topic development, does anybody have a question? You're going to hate me, but I'm not going to move until someone says yay or nay, preferably a student.
Hi, scholars. Ask a question.
Or if you don't have a question, that's totally fine. Let me know. Thank you. All right. Okay, so that gives everybody a breather and go, holy, okay, we're good? All right. So, topic development. There's several ways you can do this. Basically getting the basics, which is what we just did. What is our purpose? Who is our audience? Doing your own Q&A, which is part of what we already do when we're analyzing our audience and our purpose. Other things, so you can think of possible questions, and then what are the possible answers to those questions you've come up with? And then why would those answers be possible for those questions? If you're a visual or a list person like me, you can actually take these questions and do something that's called cubing. Describe it, compare it, associate it, analyze it, apply it, argue for it and against it. Always play your own devil's advocate so that you know how to address any topic or subtopic or issues that the audience may have. And if you're super visual, you can also use clustering or mapping. That's something that I typically use for studying and not for brainstorming, not necessarily for writing. I usually do cubing because I like bullets. I just want to be like, what is it, when, where, how, all of this. The links that I have on this slide are provide more in-depth questions, more in-depth questions that you can use for your topic development. Okay, so after we've analyzed our audience and we have a developed topic, we need to write an outline, which is basically just the plan of your writing material, your paper, where you structure it and organize your main points. And you do this because, one, it helps organize thoughts. It clearly shows the flow of information so that you can determine whether or not this is the most efficient way to get this information out to your audience. And it helps you to visually easily see, is there any missing concepts that you forgot to add or haven't thought about yet, or if you're being redundant with a couple of subtopics. Typically, the formatting is this linear style, which I kind of showed to the right of the screen. It means they rank the main points in order of their importance from major to minor. And when you format or you're thinking about your outline, you also need to still keep the audience in mind with the fact that they may not be familiar with your topic. So you need to format your outline accordingly, assuming that some people know nothing about arranging the main points and make them in a order. And so the main sections of an outline is your introduction, where you mention the topic of your essay and its thesis. The body, which could have several bulleted points for each paragraph, where you write down your topic sentence with an argument or main point, depending on the type of writing that you're doing or your topic. And then you also enter it in a more bulleted format, data, facts, and example evidence support your topic statement for that paragraph. And then lastly, once you're done with the body, you have conclusions. You wrap up the essay, restate the thesis, and summarize the goal of the paper. And one thing to keep in mind is this outline is for you. Nobody sees it. You can write it in any way you want to. It can be in fragments, bullets. It doesn't have to be beautiful, perfect sentences. Now, I know Dr. Kemp, I think last week, gave y'all a wonderful seminar on where to get your primary and secondary sources, how to evaluate them, and whatnot. And so I really wanted to talk about here is how to narrow down the parameter of your sources, because now with the technology that we have available, so much information is at our fingertips and it can be very overwhelming. And so some of the parameters that can help you narrow down your information is, well, what kind of info are you looking for? So this is where you'll determine what type of sources you need for your writing. And you should only restrict yourself to the most relevant kind of sources that makes the process easier. Next is, where do you need to look for your research? And your topic will dictate where you find your sources. So for instance, if you want to do statistics on the U.S. population, you would go to government documents like census reports. Looking for information from the science field, you would go to a well-renowned academic article. Another parameter to help kind of limit your scope of information is, how much info do you need? Different projects will require a different number of resources. So for instance, if you're talking about a controversial issue, you may need more resources than for non-controversial issues. And that is because to make a case for an argument, you don't need to just rely on one source of information. You need to show several different sources of information for your argument. And ask your instructor if it is unclear how many sources are expected to use, that you need to use. And lastly, how timely does your sources need to be? And that kind of depends on your research topics as well. And it may or may not matter. But for instance, if you wanted to know or wanted to write, in general, the cutting edge technology that we have to measure gene expression. Well, you're going to want to make sure that you get sources that were just recently printed compared to 10 years ago. I know Dr. Kemp has already shown this, but I just kind of wanted to put it here to reiterate. You definitely should always evaluate each source and never use a source that you have not evaluated with these criteria. Because paper is only as strong as its sources, and without it, it means nothing. Now, how do we draft? So drafting is just basically conquering writer's block, which I often have to, it's a big challenge for me a lot of times. And so I have here some of the things that can cause writer's block and how to deal with them. So let's say you're just having trouble beginning, like you can't even get a word down. Well, just start in the middle. There's usually when when I sit down and I start brainstorming, I'm ready to write. I kind of already have like some paragraphs ideas for like one of my paragraphs in the body. I'm just struggling with the intro. And then if I sit there and just try to make myself write the intro, even though I know how I want to write, I get writer's block and you get stressed out and then you can't write anything. So just start wherever it just feels natural. And just what I call word vomit on the piece of paper. You always go back and edit it later. Your draft does not have to be perfect. Nobody's going to see your first draft. You can leave the intro for last. And smooth over transitions after completing your draft. So don't, if you're getting hung up on how you make the paragraphs connect, don't worry about that yet. A lot of times, if I'm skipping the transition between paragraphs, at the end of the paragraph, I will put insert transition here and highlight it so I don't forget, and just do that later. Another one is what I call imposter anxiety. It's just, are you the person? Should you even be writing about this? Do you even know enough? Just push through the uncertainty. Save tiny details for last. The best way to get through this is just start writing. Another one is drowning distractions. In this wonderful technological world, and where we're basically dependent on all the technology to get through our daily lives now, distractions are all around us. And so we need to block them in whatever way is possible, whether it's on silent. Sometimes for me, I like to draft my because it gets me away from the computer, and there's absolutely no way I will get distracted by an email. And you can also try to schedule write-in blocks where you're going to, for 25 minutes straight, do nothing but write and then take a break and then stick with that. Some people have writer's block because they're trying to polish while they write, and that's just not good writing practices. It's really hard to polish something that hasn't even been created yet or is being currently created. And so the goal of first draft is just get words on the paper, and you can always polish later by REP, which we'll get to in a little bit. If you're blocked by stress, if your writer's block has gotten so severe that you're just stressed out, well, go take a real break. Get away from it. Don't read anything. Don't look at your computer. Go play a game. Go do mundane tasks, whatever, to take a break and give your brain a mental break. Another thing to help from getting stress is to break the work into bite-sized, and an outline can really help you with that as well. And then always ask for help. You can always ask classmates to be your soundboard, and you can talk through like what is stressing you out. Okay, so for the third section, we're going to talk about how to revise, edit, and proof. Revising is just making sure every part of your story serves a purpose. This is where you're basically just going to rearrange, cut or add words, substitute for words. A lot of time I get writer's block or I get stressed out because I can't come up with a perfect word on the spot yet. So I will use whatever language I want to write that out, and I'll highlight it. And then when I go back to revise, I will try to find that word. The second thing is after you're done revising, then you need to edit. Editing is where all of your grammar stuff comes into play. Make sure that you capitalize everything. All of your verbs are in the same agreement. You have all the correct punctuations, and you have spelling. And then lastly is proofreading. This just focuses on formatting errors and making sure there's just no typos, spacing, and the flow of information makes sense. And so on the right side of the screen, that little computer over there, I have a couple of websites that can help you with revising and editing. These are free. And one thing I really wanted to point out is the Natural Reader. One life hack to revising or editing or proofing is to put your written content into a text-to-audio app and have it be read to you. A lot of times you can pick up mistakes that you are not seeing on paper. And lastly, we're going to talk about citing and how to understanding plagiarism and how to avoid it. So I'm pretty sure y'all probably all know about plagiarism. It's basically either A, taking credit for someone's work or not giving what credit's due. And this typically can happen if you copy and paste something that should be a direct quote. Whether you take that information and you just put it into your own words, that's usually paraphrasing, and that requires a citation. Copying image, even if you copy an image and alter it in a way like you only want to show part of it, you still have to cite it. And then some things, this one type of plagiarism that people tend to overlook or not even realize that exists is, are you using work that you've already published in? And if it is yes, it is plagiarism if you are using it, and not if you're using it as direct quote, paraphrasing, or even just copying an image. You have to cite yourself on things that you've already previously published. So this is just a little flow chart to help y'all work through. Another thing to do that's really, really quick is to use the plagiarism detector. You can use Grammarly.com you can take your text and check it to see if it's plagiarizing. It is okay to do this. Half the time, plagiarism is not necessarily of ill intent. Sometimes it's just a mistake, and so this is how you can avoid that. Now, how do you cite? It kind of depends on like how y'all are going to want to cite, what kind of formatting y'all are going to want to use for y'all's magazine. But EasyBib is a free resource to help automatically add citations into your document. All right, so the very last thing today, we're going to talk about responsibilities, do's and don'ts. As an author, your responsibility is to give the audience your best evaluation and interpretation of the info or experiences you have collected. And to do this, always use an outline. Cite your sources appropriately. Start early. Do not procrastinate. Always ask questions if you're unsure, and always evaluate every single step. You can use track changes features while you're drafting, like Word doc, so you can up with your changes. Another thing to do, life hack, is to draft your sections or paragraphs into separate documents and you combine them all. And that way you can also edit and write as well to help you prevent or overcome stress that comes with writing. Now, do not plagiarize. You do that by citing. But do not abuse directly quoting references. You can't just write something where you start a quote from the beginning and then close the quotes at the end of your conclusion. Don't assume anything. You have cram, and do not draft and polish at the same time. It definitely causes unneeded stress and will definitely slow the progress of the writing. And that's basically all that I had to show y'all today. How do I stop sharing?
It's the little
Anybody have questions?
circle at the top, right?
Where it says stop?
It has a
Stop sharing.
All right, scholars. Let me ask them this question first. Maybe it will trigger something. What is one thing that you learned from the workshop today? I need to hear from you all. All right, Brianna.
So I usually only use one website to kind of check my citations, so I'm glad to hear that there's actually more. I mean, of course there's more, but it just never dawned on me that there actually is. So I appreciate that you brought them to our attention.
Very
Oh
good.
yeah, and those are just the ones that I checked that I also knew that they were free or they have a free version. And to me, if I was an undergrad, the free version is good enough. There's also others as well. And I didn't show the slide, but at the end of my presentation that I think all of y'all have access to, I have every single link of all the information that I have so that y'all can just click.
All right, somebody else. I think it was a fantastic presentation, Dr. McPherson.
Thank you.
Because one of the tips that you said was have it what you wrote written. I guess put it in some type of what is it like something where it will read it to you so you can hear what you
Yeah,
wrote.
the text to audio. So that natural, what is it called? Nature or reading. You can just drag and drop your entire file and it'll read it to you. That's also a good way because like when you're writing and you're reading it over and over and unfortunately your brain's going to start playing tricks on you and because you know what you mean to catch the fact that you left out end or you have a comma splice or left out words or you don't have verb agreement on sentences. So that's a really good way to do that. Also, it's like, to me, it's more efficient. It gives your brain a break. You don't have to read with your eyes. You can just back and listen. So that's one reason why I really, really like it.
I see Rhythm says that she enjoyed the outline slide. I took a picture of it because I think one of the biggest problems with writing I have is getting started, and that outline seemed key to. Okay, all right, Rhythm.
Now, let me tell you. So I usually when, especially when I'm Googling like writing assignments or y'all want to start a magazine, I usually Google to see if somebody else has done something similar to get inspiration and ideas. Like that's not copying for inspiration. Like if you have no idea how to organize something because you've never done it before, which at some point that will happen. You can go find similar articles and see how did they do the flow of information. And even if you don't like that flow, you're going to immediately know that. You're going to know why you don't like it. And you're like, well, I would have done it this way. Okay, we'll do it that way. That way you don't have to sit here and try to pull ideas out from the air, because that takes a lot of energy and a lot of time. So that's usually a good starting place too.
Yes. And I one tip I wanted to share is that sometimes when I'm typing something, I don't see the mistakes on the computer screen. I don't know why. I have to print it out sometimes, and then I see all these mistakes. I don't understand why I don't see the mistakes on the computer screen.
I am so old fashioned with that. Usually when I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is the best it can be.
Right.
My last final revision, I print it off, double space. I get into character, and I am an English professor now.
Right.
And I read it, and I'm highly critical. And I have a red ink pen where I'm all over the place writing stuff. And to me, that's like a really effective way to do that. And I feel like a lot of times these tools, they're all great to use, but I feel best use is to use a combination of tools. Don't just limit yourself to one. Don't limit yourself to one plagiarism website. They use different algorithms. So they're not exactly the same. So if you check your writing with one or two or even three or several, however how you want to do, you can definitely know that you haven't plagiarized, or you haven't, or if you're just doing it for revising and editing purposes. Use several different like different apps or different websites, and evaluate your paper on those different things to really get a really good comprehensive review of how well your paper is. Is this PowerPoint being made available to them?
Yes, I can. Yes, we can put it in our.
Yes, please let them. Because I know. So that was a little wordy.